and welcome to our third session of our philanthropy learning journey. Thank you so much for everyone joining. It's wonderful to see such a great continued turnout to these sessions. So good morning to our British participants and good evening to our participants over here in Australia. And thank you again for joining us. I know it's because of the time difference, it's getting earlier for all of you in the UK and a bit later for us in over here in Australia. So thank you for staying up to participate in our session tonight. We've got three speakers this evening. This is the third session where we're going to hear about some local community organisations and the work that they're doing. In our first session, we talked about the importance of connecting with your local communities and hearing from them about what the issues are and spending the time as part of that learning about different needs. So this is, I guess, our first step into exploring some of the issues that the community are dealing with at the moment. No doubt, very much all of them enhanced by the impacts of COVID-19. I think there's been some internet issues from a couple of our presenters this evening. So the order that I was going to do it in, I'm going to switch it around a little bit because one of our presenters is having some issues with her internet, but I understand there's quite a few people having some internet issues at the moment. So we'll see how we go. We've got three presenters, so a jam-packed session again. And really a huge thank you to all our three presenters who are coming tonight to share their work. I've asked them all to talk about the organisation, their organisation, what they do, and to talk about some of the issues that the beneficiaries they work with are facing and how they deliver programs to help overcome these issues. A lot of what we fund through Bennelong Foundation Australia is giving people those equity opportunities. So people who are experiencing different types of disadvantage and really trying to level the playing field for them. Literally in one of our cases that we're presenting from tonight, and give them the opportunities that other people have. So again, really exploring those challenges that people who are experiencing disadvantage facing and why things are so much harder for them when you're in that situation, and what programs are working in the community to help overcome that and give those people a leg up. So we have three presenters today. We have Tower Hamlets Business Partnership, which I know some of you at Benbridge have worked with in the past and might be familiar with. I've selected them, asked them to join us because they have a huge focus on education, which is one of our core pillars at Bennelong Foundation. So each organisation I've asked to come today has a similar alignment to what we do in Australia. So I thought it'd be a good place to start to share some of the issues that we are working to address over here in Australia, but have similar challenges over in the UK. We have Performance Plus Sport, who are providing equity opportunities in sport and encouraging participation in sport. And we have the Refugee Council in the UK, who help with settlement of refugees and other issues relating to asylum seekers and refugees arriving in the UK. So we did have Tower Hamlets up first, but I'm just not sure if Megan's been able to log on again. Are you there, Megan?
Hi, yes I am. Can you hear me okay, Sandra?
Yes, okay. All right, let's find you. I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, got you. Great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to talk about our charity. Some of you may have heard we're a social mobility charity. We've been working for over 30 years in Tower Hamlets Borough because we are the borough in the UK that still has the highest level of child poverty in the country. We have entrenched intergenerational unemployment and lots of our residents are employed in the informal sector. What this means is that lots of young people aren't reaching the potential that they can. They're basically remaining trapped in a cycle of poverty and not reaching their aspirations. So what we do as a charity is we operate a series of programs over a young person's life to improve their life chances. You may well know this shocking statistic, but in our borough, when a child starts school at the age of 5, they usually have a developmental age of 18 months behind that expected learning level. So when they're 5, they actually enter school with a developmental age on average of 3.5. Okay, our schools have a huge amount of work to do to catch students up to the national expectations. So in primary school, the schools do a brilliant job supporting students with that learning. And how we as a charity help is we do extensive literacy and numeracy support programs with those students. So something you could get involved in the future is reading with a student on a weekly basis over the course of a year to really boost their literary skills, and also doing the same for numeracy. So we do lots of kind of fun maths games, number games with students over the course of a year. And not only does it actually boost their confidence with numbers, but actually just their confidence in general with meeting with people they wouldn't usually meet outside their community, building confidence in speaking with adults, with business people, and giving them aspiration for the future. When we move on to secondary school, we do a lot of work as a charity focusing on employability skills. So a lot of the work we do is one-off days. So for example, most of our students, because their parents are employed in the informal sector or not in professional jobs, they would have never done interview practice in a professional style. So we do lots of one-to-one interview practice with in-depth feedback from for students on how they can improve. We run enterprise events with them to get them thinking about running their own business in the future and the skills you need in business. And we also do lots of schemes and one-off events that support students with next steps. So how do you fill out a successful UCAS application form? How do you learn when you go to university to be financially responsible and to be financially literate, to not put everything on your credit card and rack up debt? So we do lots and lots of schemes that will support students' next steps into the future as well. So those are definitely the kind of schemes people could get involved with in the future. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, particularly because I know this is a real interest area for us at the moment, is how our students have been impacted by coronavirus and in fact our wider community, and why it's so important now more than ever to be helping our students and contributing to their learning and development, particularly the business community. So everyone will have heard the horrendous impact that has been obviously brought about by the coronavirus on learning and development of students in the UK, and everyone across the UK has suffered. So of course everyone has done really, really badly over the past few months. 98% of teachers in the UK report that pupils are behind in their learning. But in our borough, what we've noticed is that boys have been particularly affected. So teachers are really reporting that boys did a lot poorer during lockdown than girls in terms of their own motivation and their own self-learning. And they're apparently even more months behind than girls. And that's also the same with Black and minority ethnic students too. Our population in Tower Hamlets is over 85% Black and minority ethnic students. So you can see this gap widening and widening and widening between the average student in the UK and our students in Tower Hamlets. So what we're really trying to tackle now is a huge amount of this educational deficit, which we're seeing in the borough. There's lots of reasons why this has happened. So first of all, you will have all heard a lot about the tech poverty. So the lack of devices for students in our area, as well as lack of access to broadband internet, has been a massive issue. Schools have been scrabbling around to provide equipment for home learning. And there's basically lots of schools who have done virtually no home classes via virtual means at all, because it's just been pointless, because, you know, literally no families have been able to log on. The home environment has also made learning very, very difficult at home for our students because of a lack of quiet space. So lots of our students live in very overcrowded households. They will not have their own private bedroom where they could do work. They may not have a kitchen table where they could do work either. So that's definitely been a major barrier to effective home working and home learning too. We've also had another major issue in our borough with students returning to school in September, even when they can, and it's been safely promoted by the government to return to school. In our Tower Hamlets community, there's been a lot of reticence towards that. It's because they're still scared of getting the virus. So when September's school date started, again, the attendance in some schools was as low as 56%. Okay, so nearly half of students not attending school, again, even in September when the government says everyone should. And that is a major barrier, not only to the students who aren't in school and not learning, but also to their classmates, because when the students who aren't in school eventually do return, they will demand a lot of the teacher's attention to actually catch up on that learning. So you're getting the whole class affected, even though there are those in school going to learn. So there's multiple issues which have really, really, really impacted our students and their learning. And this is why we particularly need to do schemes which are going to give them that extra boost. So the extra literacy, the extra numeracy, and all of that extra attention from business partners. I mean, there's been a lot of wider effects as well to our students beyond learning, of course. In terms of economics, there's been a huge surge in food bank use for our students. So there's been a huge amount of emergency food package delivery as well. There's also been a steep rise in kind of universal credit claimants because lots of our parents and adult population are in the informal sector or in 0 hours contracts, and those jobs have ended. Mental stress has been particularly high as well in our borough. Lots of our children live with older generations, so for example grandparents in their housing, and that means that during lockdown they had to shield a lot more than the average student. So our students were getting less exercise, less fresh air, less contact with the outside world than the average student. And it was so bad that actually schools literally rang every single family that went to their school to tell them that they had to take their children outside, because some schools were hearing reports that after 10 weeks, a child hadn't even been outside for 10 weeks in a whole, 10 weeks running, okay? So there's been a huge amount of build-up of mental stress in our children as well. And there's been a big increase in safeguarding issues, concerns, although this is across the nation, not specific to Tower Hamlets. So because children aren't being observed on a regular basis by the outside world, so for example, by their teachers.
I think we lost you, Megan.
Found abuse, and where social services will be involved in looking after their families. They didn't do this anymore, and it meant that lots of these families as well kind of got off the radar, and the children could have been Sorry, can you hear me, Sandra?
Yes, I can. Yeah, you're just cutting in and out a little bit, but I might have to wrap.
Okay, the children could obviously have been subject to a much more stressful situation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Megan. I know 10 minutes is a very short amount of time, so not a lot of time to really deep dive into some of the basic issues, never mind what's happening with COVID. But thank you so much for sharing that. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. If you do have a question, because there's a lot of people on the call, could you please use the hand up function, which you can find on the bottom of your screen. There should be a hand up function there, but I feel like we're losing Megan a little bit because she had some bad internet access. So I think we might actually move on because she's frozen from our screen. But it's quite shocking to think that these kids are coming to school just only with a 3.5-year-old literacy level and the amount of time they have to catch up. So things like reading to students and doing their numeracy is really valuable because a lot of them probably weren't read to as children, and so they're far further behind in their literacy and start further back at school. But I think we've lost Megan, unfortunately. So if she comes back, we might have some time to ask some questions for her at the end of the session, but I might switch over then to our next presenter. So slightly different tone and work that they're doing. So next up we have Performance Plus Sport, and we have Jamie Fever presenting. So I might hand over to you, Jamie.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Sandra, for inviting us on. Yeah, my name's James. I'm the director of Performance Plus Sport UK. We are a sports charity. I run the charity with my father, John, who's also on the call there, the other side of London. So we started we're a family-run charity. We were both ex-professional tennis players. We both were very lucky to have the opportunity to travel, to tour and experience everything that has to offer. We both had the opportunity to get the best out of ourselves through sport. So finishing our careers, we're both very aware of the value of sport and the opportunity that it can create. Tennis, some people, the perception is that tennis is sort of an elitist sport. We're also very aware that not every young person has the opportunity to get the best out of themselves through sport and get those opportunities like we did. So that was kind of the motivation to start the charity. We started by supporting young tennis players, and then we broadened out into other sports and other target areas once we realized how much of a difference we could make in disadvantaged communities. So yeah, like I said, we started in 2016, and since we kind of broadened out, we've been going for just over 2 years. So we believe that every young person who has the right attitude should have the opportunity to succeed. We also believe that you don't have to be the best at what you do to get the best out of yourself. But if you have that opportunity, then you should have that chance, and it shouldn't be for a lack of opportunity. So we try to step in and create those opportunities for young people who may want to progress their career and perhaps turn professional in their chosen sport. Or it could be for young people who have been involved in sport and perhaps lost their way or fallen on hard times, and we'll look to pick them up and get them on the right track with their kind of career path using education and getting them back on track. So we, all in all, we believe in the power of sport and how it can be a tool for young people to get the best out of themselves. So to implement that kind of philosophy, we have 3 core activities. The first is that we will look to work with delivery partners to deliver programs to groups in the most deprived areas, mainly in London, but also a lot of our programs are run outside of London. So last year we delivered 11 programs in the lowest 28% of the most deprived areas in England. These partners that we work with largely do a lot of the initial hard work in terms of bringing the kids off the street and engaging them into sport, and then we'll try and step in and create more regular and sustainable opportunities for them to participate and progress. Our second activity would be to offer further support to those most deserving young people and the ones most in need. So that's when the sort of charity really comes to life in terms of finding those individuals who really want to progress, but have some barriers in front of them. So from our sort of first activity with the programs to the groups, we'll use the coach recommendations to offer individual support, and we'll also form partnerships with other organisations where they'll refer individuals onto us. So we work with Street Games, who are a nationwide charity, and work with thousands of clubs and hubs. They've recommended us individuals for us to support. We've also worked with Centrepoint, who's a young homeless charity, and Hope for the Young, who are a refugee organisation, and they'll refer individuals onto us, and then we'll step in and offer them that individual support. Yeah, we're not just a charity that looks to fund individuals and programs. We'll also commit to providing mentorship for all the programs we deliver and all the individuals we support. From our work around working with various communities and various delivery partners, the two main challenges that we've experienced are underfunding and, importantly, a lack of positive guidance. So the delivery partners that we work with, they suffer as much as any young individual. They suffer financially, especially through times of COVID. So by us stepping in and funding coach costs, facility fees, and subsidising memberships, we'll be easing the pressure from the delivery partners. The individuals that we support, the ones that really want to get the best out of themselves through sport, that costs money. And you only have to ask my father, who's on the call, as to how much it might cost to travel the world playing tennis. I was privileged, I was lucky enough for him to offer me support when I needed it most, and not everyone has that opportunity. So the ones we look to, Performance Plus looks to target the most deserving individuals where there's a real need and take the costs away. So also many people in privileged positions have many different places that they can turn to receive support and guidance. The individuals that we support don't have such luxuries, and that's why we try and provide mentorship for all the individuals we support. So we'll provide, for all the individuals that we support, we'll provide regular mentor meetings and offer that source of support where they might not have that otherwise.
Great.
So just like a couple of case studies, or do you want to, should we move on? So a couple of case studies, yeah, to try and give an idea. One of the delivery partners that we work with, called Right Development Foundation, they're based in Barking and Dagenham. Barking and Dagenham is the 5th most deprived place in England, and this delivery partner, I talk about the amazing work that they do, but they do the hardest work in terms of bringing the kids off the streets and out of boredom and into sport. And then Performance Plus will step in and work with Right Development Foundation to fund and subsidise the memberships for the young people so that they can participate, so that they can train. And they wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. They wouldn't have been able to afford it because you know, a lot of the families are struggling. That we heard from the previous presentation, you know, some of the professionals are losing their jobs and they can't afford to pay for these memberships. So we'll step in and try and give them the opportunity. Then last year, from that delivery program to the groups of young people, we will offer further support. So last year we offered three of those individuals additional support. And when I say support, I mean it was funding for areas that they need support in and also essential mentoring. So the 3 people that we supported have ambitions to play professional basketball, but they face severe barriers in front of them in terms of having that opportunity. So we'll step in to create that. And a second example would be a case study where we acted upon a referral from a boxing club based in New Cross in southeast London called Double Jab. They took a young boy in called Chima, who was an ex-youth offender, and they did the initial hard work in getting him inspired for boxing. and then they've worked with him over a couple of years, and we've stepped in to offer essential support to him, where to keep guiding his career. So we funded coach qualifications for him to become a professional coach. We provided some paid work experience for him, and the mentoring has helped to re-engage him into education and keep him on the path. So it's when you touch upon the case studies that you really start to hear how young people can thrive. But we try and find the ones that really deserve it, and where there's a real need in terms of being a block in front of them. So the main social outcomes, I guess, first of all, would be to reduce the financial pressures, because that's often the first block in front of you. If you can't afford it or have the opportunity, then there's a limiting factor straight in front of you. But for the young people, through sport, we'll also try and create a fairer playing field for those that want to advance their career. We'll minimize the risk of crime and negative temptations by giving them a positive alternative, and will increase educational opportunities to enhance their career prospects. So unlike the previous organisation, which has been going for 30 years, I think it was, we've only been going for since 2016. So we're a young charity, but in the years that we've been working, we've found some amazing young people and worked with some amazing delivery partners. So we see that there's a clear need in terms of a lack of funding, a lack of guidance, and a clear lack of opportunity. So if we can continue to find these young sports people and my father says polish the diamonds, then we'll be doing our job and trying to make a difference through sport. So yeah, I hope that gives a little overview as to what we do. And yeah, if there's any questions or after the call, if there's anyone who'd like to perhaps get involved with the mentoring side of things, that makes a big difference to the engagement of our programs. When we simply just fund something, or when we fund a young person with mentoring, if you can couple it up, then that makes the real difference. So if anyone did want to get involved in the mentoring, then we're always looking for people. But yeah, if there's any questions, then.
Yeah, thank you, James. I think when we first met, I was really struck by how much you have achieved in such a short amount of time, and really starting out to support those young people who were very talented at sport but weren't able to really pursue a professional career because of those barriers that you mentioned. And now you've expanded out to broaden your work much more and provide equitable opportunities for participation, not just career development, which is just fantastic. We love a sport program here in Bennelong Foundation in Australia, and the reason being is that it just provides so many benefits to the participants. Teamwork, being part of a community, sense of self, putting their time into some positive infrastructure. And one of the amazing outcomes is also it can tend to result in improved educational outcomes, and like you've mentioned in your presentation, even career opportunities for some of the participants too. So sport is such an important lever in changing people's lives, and unfortunately those who's experiencing disadvantage from impoverished communities don't get that same access that those in more privileged situations do. So organisations like yours are really valuable in, again, levelling that playing field. We do have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone had anything they wanted to ask James.
I had a quick question, Sandra. It's Noreen from the London office. James, do you have any stats on how many girls you're helping versus boys?
Yeah, we had, so last year, in the year from September 19 to August 20, across the people that we supported, the ratio was 7-3 in terms of boys to girls. We haven't targeted, well, last year we hadn't targeted to support more boys or more girls. That was just those were the stats that we came across. And from there we can make active decisions to try and support more girls. But it was 7-3 in terms of boys to girls. I think that's probably a reflection upon society, how many boys versus girls are getting involved in sport, perhaps. And, you know, there's a lot of, not, you know, just us, but many of sports organisations trying to do work to level that out.
Yeah, good question. I think Karina had a question. Did I see your hand up?
Thanks, Sandra. I couldn't find the hand up button, so I resorted to the good old hand up. Thanks, James, for that presentation. Really interesting. I had a couple of questions for you, actually. Seeing as you work through a lot of partner organizations, how do you track success or the impact of your programs? That was my first question. And the second question was, you talked about the importance of, even more greater importance of programs like this during COVID times. How do you actually continue to deliver during COVID times? Because, you know, you've got restrictions in place, and I'm not quite sure how it works in the UK, and it's over a protracted period of time. So I was interested, and that could keep going for months.
Yeah. So we, to answer your first question, the delivery partners that we work with, last year we delivered, we worked with 11 different delivery partners, and you know, it's about the relationships with the young people that we support, but also the people that lead these organizations. And I'll commit to visiting them every 3 months to see what's going on in the work that they're doing. We have a simple sort of list of sort of expectations that we'll want to work with them in the first place, and if they're willing to engage from the start, then the relationship will go in the right direction. You know, in terms of success, the case study that I mentioned with Right Development Foundation, the basketball organization, our delivery program to the groups, we supported 13 young people funding their memberships. And then from that group of 13, we then supported 3 individuals. So, you know, whilst it's not the only measure of success, we want to try and find the individuals coming through that group program, the ones who are really kind of putting their hand up, as you did, to offer them the support where they really have a desire to progress themselves. So, you know, it's not, if we supported a group of 20 and then we only supported 1 individual, it's not a measure, it's not a failure, but we'll try and use that as a measure of how many we're supporting in a group and then how many we can go and support individually. Yeah, so that's the, I guess, one of the measures that we use. And in terms of COVID, a lot of our, back in, well, because we work in different sports, back at the start of the year, some sports came back quicker than others. So tennis, for example, came back quite quickly. Basketball and boxing came back quite slowly. So, you know, a lot of the programs were put on pause just because the facilities weren't open. And but the individuals, we will obviously continue to support. The mentoring can definitely continue via Zoom or via, you know, meeting them. And we try to create the opportunities when we can. But in response to COVID, we set up a hardship fund for the young people, the coaches and the mentors and the young people within our network. They, you know, a lot being self-employed, their work was cut straight away, which creates a lot of anxiety and stress, and, you know, no income with families. So in response, we set up funds which we ran for 8 weeks, to which we provided a weekly transfer to help with essential costs. But like mentioning that mentoring is always a part of what we do, we provided workshops, weekly workshops for everyone on the fund to try and keep their spirits high and keep them engaging through times of lockdown. So we've started that again as of this week. We relaunched the fund because, you know, we're in another lockdown. So you know, we tried to respond in the best way possible. But while some of the delivery programs will go on pause, have to go on pause, we'll always continue to support the individuals where we can. And we set up the hardship fund as well.
Thank you, James. And again, another example of how the impacts of COVID have just made the gap wider for people that are reliant on organisations such as yourselves as well. So really challenging times for those groups in the community. I'm going to keep it moving. We're keeping this choppy and sharp and today, and we thank you so much, James, for joining us and for giving your time to do that presentation and for sharing your journey, and congratulations on everything that you've achieved in such a short period of time, and hopefully everyone can be back on the tennis courts and boxing rings and basketball courts soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Great to hear your story. All right, well, I'm going to now pop back over to, I'm going to put myself here. I'm going to now, keeping this moving, pass on to Hannah and Holly, who are here talking from the Refugee Council UK. And so we've got two presenters for this session, and I believe we are starting with Hannah. Over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting us. I'm really excited to talk about Refugee Council. I'm going to share my screen now and get cracking because I know we've only got 10 minutes. Hope everyone can see that okay. Sorry, loading. Can everyone see that?
Yep, working well.
Yeah, great. Lovely. So as you can see here, Refugee Council was set up nearly 70 years ago in response to the UN Convention for Refugees. Our organisation's vision is that the UK will be a country that respects the dignity of everyone who seeks protection, regardless of the outcome of their claims for asylum, and to ensure that those who are granted asylum are supported to live safe and fulfilling lives. So we really aim to champion to be the champion of refugee rights, transforming refugees' lives, holding governments to account and changing public attitudes for the better. So I'm going to move on now to the Refugee Convention, and I won't read it out for you, but this is the UN 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, which the UK is a party to, and it gives a definition of refugees here. So I think it's quite useful to point out here that sometimes people get confused talking about economic refugees or economic migrants, but to gain the protection granted to refugees, you must meet one or more of the 5 requirements as set out in the convention here. So you can see persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, whereas an economic migrant might leave their country due to harsh economic conditions or simply to seek a better life. So these are the stats for last year, which were released this June. So you can see here 79.5 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide, and actually that number has almost doubled in the past decade, and it's the highest figure on record. So forced displacement now actually affects more than 1% of humanity, and about 40% of those people are children that were displaced last year. So the next one is countries of origin. So you can see here nearly 70% of refugees come from these 5 countries. Might not be surprising to see Syria at the top, and since 2014 Syria has been the main country of origin for refugees. Afghanistan has remained in the top few countries of origin for refugees since the 80s. Venezuela is new to the list, and that's kind of partly because of a change in categorization of Venezuelans displaced abroad. So they're still counted as refugees, even if the formal refugee status determination hasn't been done. And you can see here the hosting countries. So it's interesting to think that actually the UK hosts less than 1% of the world's refugees, because sometimes the media or other kind of opinions might lead you to think otherwise. But yeah, most people are internally displaced, so about 46 million people are internally displaced, and these 85% of refugees live in countries neighbouring their countries of origin. So you can see here, you know, generally Middle Eastern, well, a variety of countries there. So refugees in the UK. So there's 2 main routes for refugee protection in the UK, as you can see here. So applying for asylum, so travelling to the UK in however means possible, and refugee resettlement. So asylum applications actually increased in 2019 compared to 2018. And but the number of asylum applications actually equates to a tiny fraction of non-EEA nationals arriving in the UK. For resettlement programs, so if you haven't heard of this these programs before, UNHCR identifies refugees in need of resettlement in the country that they've sought asylum. They then submit these candidates to the British government, who decide which cases to accept, and if they are accepted, they're safely resettled to the UK and supported here for up to 5 years. Unfortunately, there is only enough resettlement spaces for 1% of the world's refugees to be resettled. And they're resettled if their lives are at risk, they're particularly vulnerable, or they have specialised health needs, and there's no hope of them returning home. So to give you a bit of context, 27% of the refugees submitted for resettlement are survivors of violence and torture. And yeah, as I said, resettled refugees are always met at the airport from organisations such as ourselves and taken to their new homes. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, resettlement has been on hold since March this year. So the asylum process for those people who make their own way to the UK, you can see here briefly. Asylum seekers are protected from removal once they've made an asylum claim and they're waiting for a decision. The screening interview is used to collect basic information such as their identity, their country of origin, how they came to the UK and when, what documents they have. And the substantive interview, which is the main interview, the asylum interview you can see there, is when the applicant needs to really demonstrate, really show that they are in need of protection and they can't safely be returned to their country of origin. So we hope by this point they've secured the advice of a lawyer. There is legal aid available, but they can't go to any solicitor for that because it's just not available. And that solicitor isn't able to join them in the interview. And they check against all the other information given so far to make sure that a consistent account is given. So decisions, there's no set timescale, and straightforward cases have a target of 6 months. The person making the decision on your claim might not necessarily be the person that interviewed you, but those case holders at the UK Visas and Immigration, so the UK Home Office, have to consider the applicant's account of persecution and any supporting evidence they can offer to decide whether it meets the criteria for granting asylum. So, for example, thinking back to that 1951 convention, they have to show that the harmful treatment they fear amounts to persecution, that that's well-founded, that it's one of the 5 reasons that was specified before, that they can't find protection in another part of their home country, and that they would be at risk of experiencing such persecution in the future if they were returned to their home country. So as of March 2020, there was a backlog of nearly 52,000 cases waiting for an initial decision. And of those, 61% have been waiting for more than 6 months. So the process itself can be really traumatic, really daunting and really humiliating. So I guess just remember that those people have been through trauma and are being asked to relive their experiences to be able to provide evidence. And meanwhile, these people seeking asylum are kind of putting their lives on hold. Once they've spent any money they've come with, they have to spend that first. They're given just over £5 per day to cover their living costs. And unfortunately, they're not entitled to work. So I'm going to pass over to Holly now to speak about the rest.
Great, thanks, Hannah. So I'm going to just give a little bit more context on the services that we provide and how we support our clients, clients being refugees in this case. So we have our main services operating in London, Hertfordshire, South East, etc. And we actually recently launched a national info line in response to COVID-19. So we're actually partnering with Welsh Refugee Council, Scottish Refugee Council and Bryson Care in Northern Ireland. And we launched a national info line to support refugees across the UK who can call a sort of free helpline number, and we have advisors on hand to give a whole range of advice and signposting services. And we've got funding to do that until March, obviously situation pending. Our core work is around the sort of below 5 areas. So we're the only national service offering support to all unaccompanied refugee children who arrive alone seeking safety in England. So this includes mental health therapy, care arrangements, education, helping trafficked children and those whose ages have been disputed. Mental health services, so we've got a team of highly qualified therapists who deliver one-to-one counselling, psychosocial groups and intensive casework for clients. So for asylum seekers, so as you might understand by now, asylum seekers are those who are still waiting for a decision on their claim. We provide sort of signposting services through our hotline, and we also have destitution centers to support those who are homeless and destitute. We support refugee resettlement, so Hannah talked about that. Some of those most vulnerable who are resettled here, we support them right from picking them up from the airport, showing them their new local area, organising housing, bank accounts and access to benefits. And then integration as well. So those refugees that have come to the UK, claimed asylum through their own means, we support them through the integration journey, right from accessing health and housing through to social connection and education and employment. All of our areas of service feeds into our advocacy, research and policy work as well. So we have an advocacy team that aims to use the evidence from the services that we deliver to campaign for change at a policy level as well. If you could go to the next slide, Hannah, thank you. So to focus a little bit on our integration work, once a refugee is given the right to remain, so they're given status in the UK after applying for asylum, they're given just 28 days to move out of their asylum accommodation, get access to welfare or find a job and find somewhere to live. And obviously that's a very short amount of time, and one of the key issues there is that the time it takes to get universal credit is actually 5 weeks. So beyond the 28 days that an asylum seeker is given time to access that welfare. So estimates are that actually about 1 in 2 refugees do become homeless for a period of their integration in the UK. So a lot of our work in integration is that kind of key crisis support, supporting them into housing and accessing welfare. And then once they're secure, supported and safe, we support them through their journey to become live sustainable and fulfilling lives by accessing employment. So employment, the unemployment rate for refugees is 4 times the national average. I won't read all of these out because I know we don't have a lot of time, but these are some of the key barriers to employment that I don't think would surprise many of you. Next slide, please, Hannah. So we have a few key projects in place on employment. So for example, we have a partnership with Starbucks where we support around 100 refugees a year through customer service training every month. And then they get a guaranteed interview at Starbucks for a barista position. We also have a partnership with the NHS where we support the requalification of refugee doctors. And that's obviously been going really well. Just last month, we had 9 refugee doctors requalify and start their posts in the NHS. So that program's been running since 2011. More recently, we've launched a professional program for clients with professional backgrounds. Probably around 60% of the clients that we work with actually have university qualifications and professional experience from their countries of origin, and we're really hoping to connect them better to their professional careers through training and internship opportunities. Next slide. Just as an example of our programs sort of feeding into advocacy and policy work, Hannah mentioned before that you know, around 61% of asylum seekers have been waiting longer than 6 months to get a claim on their decision. However, unlike Australia, in the UK, asylum seekers don't have working rights. So one of our campaigns at the moment is around calling on the government to change its rules on allowing people to seek asylum, who are seeking asylum, to access work while they're still waiting for their claim. As you can imagine, having such a long period of unemployment and then facing the risks of destitution on receiving status has a lot of negative impacts. So that's just one of the areas that our advocacy team is working on as well. Great. Sorry, I sort of raced through that, but
thank you. I know, I think I'm just trying to jam as much as we can into the hour, but thank you, Holly and Hannah. Really valuable to hear about the context of asylum seekers and the processes of becoming a refugee and actually transitioning from that asylum seeker category to a refugee category, and then the challenges that continue beyond getting asylum and becoming a British citizen and getting that refugee status. So a huge amount of work that your organisation needs to address, and very valuable for our community to hear about those statistics and just understand the context and some of the challenges. We might have just time for maybe one question before we wrap up, one or two maybe. We might be able to squeeze that in. Karina, does anyone have a, no, Karina's got a question, but does anyone else have one? Sorry? I've got one. Phil's got one too. Oh, okay, Phil. All right, we'll do Phil and then Karina.
Great, thanks, Anna. Look, thanks for a great presentation. Clearly, Australia's got nothing to be proud about in its treatment of asylum seekers and refugees. But one of the biggest problems in terms of social licence to operate in the refugee space in our country has been what's perceived to be a lawyer's picnic. In other words, you can have an appeal, another appeal, and the appeals can go on for some years. And if you think you've got a backlog in your court system, Australian asylum seekers can be waiting, years. But there's this unfortunate community pushback that there are just too many appeal options. So in the UK, how have you handled the issue around, once the decision's made, how many appeal rights are there subsequently?
Yeah, really interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't think I can really answer that, and I don't know, Holly, if you can, but I think it's really interesting if you look up the statistics. I don't have them on hand. There's a huge amount of people who are denied asylum that go through, that when they have that initial decision, and actually once they appeal, a huge number are overturned and they are given the right to appeal. And it's a big problem in the UK that it has to reach that point of going to court for a judge to say this is unlawful. And unfortunately, I don't have the statistics to hand. I don't know, Holly, if you have anything to add there.
52%, I believe, last year of decisions were overturned on appeal. So they were approved once they went to appeal. So
thanks.
Yeah.
Karina? Sorry, Karina? Might get you unmute yourself, Karina, sorry. Good.
Yes, sorry, Sandra. And thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Obviously, through the work of the Bennelong Foundation in Australia, we're well familiar with the space, but even then hearing the statistics was quite mind-boggling, especially, and shocking, especially with regard to the risk of homelessness, and the fact that refugees in the UK don't have the right to work. Anyway, my question was more to do with how do you get your funding? Are you, do you get government funding, or is it purely based on fundraising through philanthropic organizations? I was interested in that. Or are you a quasi-government organization?
Yeah, it's quite a mix of funding, so dependent on what the service is. So for example, resettlement is solely government funded, whereas other services like asylum seekers, generally we're reliant on donations and fundraising. So it is really quite a mix of where our funding comes from. Holly, and other sort of grants and...
Yeah, so I think an important note to make is that a substantial amount of funding in the last few years has actually been from the European Asylum Integration and Migration Fund, and we have funding from that for the next 2 years, but it is quite uncertain what will happen, obviously, in Brexit times, how the Home Office will decide to take forward support for our sector, because it has been quite substantially funded through the EU for the last few years as well. So yeah, so the future is uncertain, I guess, is all I'll say.
Well, once again, I mean, we see it all the time, but the impacts of Brexit and, you know, I mean, it's obviously already happening, and it's what, a month away, I think, from being finalized, is it? Or a couple of months away?
Yeah.
Really far-reaching. So, yeah, you're doing great work, and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got one more question. I appreciate that we're getting close to the hour, so if people need to go, that's fine, but we'll have one more question and then we'll do a wrap-up. So, Omar, I think you had a question?
Hi, Holly, Hannah. I've got one question. So with the UK, with Brexit, UK splitting from Europe, I know there's like the Schengen agreement where people can move from specific country and then have another asylum in another country within the European Union, including the UK. How does Brexit now affect those people who have landed somewhere in Europe and then really moved to the UK? And is that an issue?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And there's, you might have heard of the Dublin Conventions about which country is responsible for which asylum application. You know, if they arrived in France and then travelled to the UK, it can be disputed about whether they should be seeking asylum in the UK or France. So it does get quite complicated. And I think we're still, as far as I know, we're still waiting for those details to kind of be agreed and finalised by the UK government and the EU.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to our presenter, to Megan, to James, to Holly and Hannah. I know we just had a very, very short just a taster almost of the challenges that your organisations are seeking to address, just between the three of you, such diverse issues that you're working to overcome. We had Tower Hamlets looking at education equality and supporting those young people living in London who, in the borough of Tower Hamlets, who are starting on so far behind at school and with without the opportunities that other communities have, those social networks, educational opportunities, and aspiration and knowledge of the system, and how Tower Hamlets are working to address that, and the impacts of COVID, which has just really, really deepened those issues. We've heard from Performance Plus Sport, which again, creating equity opportunities for those talented young people who wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to realise their potential and build those careers, and then also helping to expand sport and make it accessible to a whole group of other people as well. And then from the Refugee Council, who are really helping to address some of those through the advocacy work, inequalities that asylum seekers are experiencing, and then helping those that do get that refugee status all the way from setting up their first bank accounts, finding a home, and then at the other end into employment. And actually it was great to see on the list the internship work, and Holly and I worked out that she actually lived in Sydney for quite some time and worked for Career Seekers, which is an organisation that provides internship opportunities for refugees who we've actually funded here in Australia. So that was a really nice connection to have with Holly. It's a small world. Yeah, great to see that work it's a very successful program. Great to see that work being rolled out in the UK as well. So very much a very high level, like almost like a teaser of some of the issues that we could be looking to address through the foundation, and very much a small part of the extensive list of focus areas that you might support as a philanthropist that I showed on our first session. So really just today's session was about just opening, having a look inside the box a little bit about some of the issues that different communities are facing, and to start to understand and get the context of why this work is so valuable that these three organisations are doing. So I feel like there's a comment needed to be said. Karina, did you want to say something? Yeah, Karina and Jeff.
Hi Sandra, thanks very much for your presentation. Thank you to the presenters. They were all fantastic, and just showed the amount of energy and enthusiasm that is there in the community looking to make the world a better place. We've progressed a lot with the Bennelong Foundation UK in the last 12 months. And I also just wanted to say well done to everyone on the call and all those that have been on the previous calls for the enthusiasm and the engagement that you've shown with what is an essential part of our organisation worldwide. So well done to everybody. I can assure you, from someone who has been involved in it, in the Bennelong Foundation for 20 years, the effort and energy and time and resources that you put in are rewarded many, many, many times over that sort of journey. And the world becomes a better place, and we all become, hopefully, better people and good workmates and contributors to the Bennelong organisation and ultimately to society. So thank you everyone, and really well done. It's fantastic, and we love watching the progress and everything that you've achieved so far.
Thank you. Well said, Jeff. And yeah, thank you again for everyone who has given their time to participate in the learning journey so far. Our next session is in a couple of weeks, and we have our own Howard Jones from St Million Estate talking about Cornwall, where they are based, and discussing some of the challenges that community faces. So we're going to continue on in the theme of understanding community needs. We've discussed London, and now our next session will be about Cornwall. So I look forward to seeing you all there. I hope you're all keeping well and safe, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.